Hey all, today I'm going to be telling you what a remortgage or a refinance actually is. I'm going to be explaining how a refinance actually works and what happens to all the money. I'll also be telling you some positives and negatives of a refinance. If you enjoy this video or it helps you learn more about property investing or just properties in general, then be sure to subscribe to the channel and drop a like down below. So what actually is a remortgage? And just a quick one, a remortgage and a refinance are the exact same thing. They're just interchangeable terms. But effectively it's the process of moving from one loan to another loan. You could transfer from a residential loan onto a different residential loan, or from a buy-to-let loan onto a different buy-to-let loan, or even a residential loan onto a buy-to-let loan. Or you could be transferring from a more complex product, like a bridging loan, onto a buy-to-let loan. And you could do this in two different ways. You could do it as two completely separate transactions, so from going from a separate bridging loan onto a separate buy-to-let loan, or you could do it as part of like a combined product and you'd just be maturing from the bridge-to-let loan, so from the bridging portion of the loan onto the buy-to-let portion of the loan. Or you might just have a normal residential mortgage and your fixed rate period has expired, so you're now onto a variable rate mortgage and you just want to refinance back on to a fixed rate product. So why would you want to refinance and what are the benefits? And effectively, just as I said, you might have been on a fixed rate product at quite a low interest, say like a 2-year fix for 1.5%, but obviously your 2 years have elapsed, so you're about to transfer onto the variable rate portion of the loan, which has a much higher interest rate at like say 4.5%. So obviously you don't really want to pay that 4.5%, so you remortgage back on to a different fixed rate product. Or maybe you're currently on a 2-year fix at say like 2%. But obviously because the interest rates have just been cut, you might be shopping around and you might be able to find a different 2-year fix at 1.3%, which is obviously much lower, so you could take advantage and remortgage onto that lower interest rate. Now this is obviously really great because you're transferring onto a lower interest rate, which means that you've got a lower monthly repayment each month, and over the life of the loan, you won't be incurring quite as much interest. Now another reason you might want to refinance is because you've almost paid off your original mortgage, but you really want a big lump sum of cash, maybe for a holiday or to buy a second house or a new car or something like that. So obviously let's say you had a £200,000 house and you've pretty much entirely paid off your original mortgage, so you want to take out a new one. So you could remortgage onto a different mortgage and like, I don't know, say a £100,000 mortgage, so that you'd be given £100,000 to spend as you wish. Now that actually sounds a little bit complex, so I'll be sure to explain later how exactly that works, as in how you can remortgage from one loan onto a bigger loan and get given money that you can spend as you like. So effectively the two main reasons to remortgage are one, for a lower interest rate, and two, so you can take out some money to spend how you wish. You might also have just transferred onto the variable rate portion of your loan and want to go back onto a fixed rate product. Or you might want to change loan products entirely. Maybe you've currently got a residential mortgage, but you want to change it into a buy-to-let mortgage so that you can rent the property out. Now unfortunately there are also some downsides to refinancing as well, and the first one is transaction fees. So obviously everyone's heard of early repayment charges, but why exactly are they a problem? So if you're still within your fixed rate period, so let's say you took out a 5-year fix and it's only been 4 years, so you're still in that initial 5 years, the lender will actually make you pay a portion or a percentage as a fee to remortgage. So you might have to pay like 2% of your outstanding loan just to like close out this 5-year fixed deal that you're on and go to a different product. Now obviously if you've got quite a big mortgage, like a £500,000 mortgage, then suddenly 2% is actually really big. It's actually quite a big number, and it might cost you thousands to get out of your current deal. And obviously if you're only saving like 50 quid a month or maybe 100 quid a month on cheaper mortgage repayments, that obviously doesn't quite make it worth it because you're having to pay a few thousand up front to get out of the deal in the first place. But if you're on the variable rate portion of your loan, or maybe you've got a variable rate loan in the first place or a tracker rate loan, then actually you might not have any early repayment charges to pay. Another downside is that if you're remortgaging onto a bigger loan, your monthly repayments are likely to go up. Say if you had a mortgage of like £150,000, your monthly repayments are probably somewhere around £600 a month. Now if you wanted to refinance onto a £300,000 loan to replace that £150,000 loan, your monthly repayments are probably going to be much higher. Another downside is that as part of your refinancing, your LTV might go up and therefore your interest rate is likely to be higher too. Let's say you had that £150,000 loan and it was on a £300,000 property. That's a 50% LTV, which is obviously really good. So you've probably got quite a good deal and have quite a low interest rate. But say if you wanted to refinance onto a £225,000 loan, that's obviously about a 75% LTV. That's obviously not quite as good, and the interest rate's likely to be higher, and therefore it's going to be not only a bigger monthly repayment to pay, but you're also going to be paying more interest on top of it. If you've enjoyed the video so far, then be sure to let me know what you think about refinancing in the comments below. Do you think it's a good thing? Or do you think getting into additional debt is bad? But how does refinancing actually work? Now this is actually quite complex, so let's try and think about it in a different way. So when you take out a mortgage to go and buy a house, the bank actually gives you that money. Let's say you wanted to buy a £100,000 house and you had £20,000. That means you have to borrow £80,000 from the bank. So imagine that the bank actually bank transferred you that 80 grand into your account, and you then had 100 grand and could go out and buy the property. So obviously you still owe the money back to the bank, that 80 grand that they've effectively transferred to you. So at the moment you have a house and you owe 80 grand back to the bank. Let's imagine a few years go by and you start paying down that loan and you've got about £50,000 left. It's probably going to take about 10 years. And in that time your property is going to increase as well. Let's just imagine that it's increased to £200,000. I don't know if it would or not, maybe depending on what part of the world and what part of the country that you're in, but let's just go with that example. So you've now got a £200,000 property and a £50,000 loan. And you want to refinance onto a bigger loan so that you can go out and buy yourself a new car. So let's say you want to refinance onto a £100,000 loan. So effectively the bank, a different bank, would transfer you £100,000 into your account because you're taking out that loan. Now you have to instantly pay off the first loan of £50,000. So the second loan of £100,000 comes into your account, you pay off the first loan of £50,000, and you've obviously got £50,000 left. And you can use that money to go out and buy a car, or go on holiday, or start property investing and buy a different property. But why would a bank give you that £100,000? And it's because obviously you've got the £200,000 property there. So your LTV is £100,000 compared to a £200,000 is a 50% LTV. And then obviously you've used that £100,000 to pay off your first loan of £50,000. So the only loan that you have on that property is the new one of £100,000. And obviously if you can't meet the repayments on that loan of the £100,000, then the bank will take the property, sell it, and obviously they'll get their £100,000 back to them. So obviously they're quite comfortable lending you that money. Obviously it's only a 50% LTV, which is quite comfortable for the bank. So a question that you might ask is, do you have to use £50,000 of that £100,000 coming in to pay off the first mortgage? And most of the time the answer is yes, because obviously you can't have too many mortgages on one property. For example, say you had that property of £200,000, you couldn't have one mortgage of £50,000, another mortgage of £100,000 and another mortgage of £100,000, because in total you'd have £250,000 worth of mortgages on a £200,000 property, which obviously is like 125% LTV, which obviously doesn't exist because, well, the banks wouldn't really do that. They only ever go as high as 90% LTV or lower. But actually on that specific example I gave, you might not have to pay off the first loan if you didn't want to. Instead of remortgaging from the first loan, paying it off and getting the second loan instead, you could just take out a second loan, because obviously you'd have one loan of £100,000, one loan of £50,000, and together that's £150,000. And obviously if your property is worth £200,000, then that's only a 75% LTV, which is still fairly okay for the banks. Another question you might have is, could you refinance onto a smaller loan? Say if you had a loan of £50,000 on a property worth £200,000, could you get rid of it and only have a loan of £25,000? Like, would you be able to remortgage from a £50,000 loan down to a £25,000 loan? And the answer is no, because obviously the second loan of £25,000 isn't going to be enough to repay that first loan of £50,000. You'd effectively have two loans out at the same time, because you'd get your second loan out at £25,000, try to repay the first loan, but it would only repay some of it, so you'd still have £25,000 left there and £25,000 left here. And you'd effectively have two separate mortgages, both still adding together for £50,000. So you could remortgage from one £100,000 loan onto a different £100,000 loan, Or you could remortgage upwards from a £100,000 loan up to a £150,000 loan, because then it would still repay the first loan and you'd obviously have that £50,000 spare to do whatever you wanted with. But obviously you can only do this if the second loan obviously is still okay in LTV terms compared to your property. You'd obviously have to, if you wanted to get a £150,000 loan, have a property worth £200,000 or maybe more, because then you'd still be at a 75% LTV, which is fairly okay. You could probably go as high as 80 or 90% LTV, but obviously the banks typically don't lend any higher than that. So obviously technically in reality, it doesn't work exactly like that, because a bank is never going to transfer £80,000 directly into your account or transfer £150,000 directly into your account and trust you to repay that first loan you had. They just don't really trust you that much. So effectively what they do is get solicitors to be like a middleman. Obviously you give your money to the solicitors, they give their money to the solicitors. The solicitors sort it all out and pay off anyone that needs to be paid off, and then you get whatever's left at the end. And if you've made it this far into the video, then be sure to check out some of my other videos and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Let's go through a different example, and I'll try and make this one a little bit more relatable, and we'll use the whiteboard as well. So let's say you had a £300,000 house, and on that house you had a 75% LTV mortgage, which is £225,000. But you wanted to take out a little bit more money onto that mortgage because, I don't know, your dishwasher broke or something like that. So you're going to refinance that onto a bigger loan so that you can get some spare money to buy a new dishwasher. Now obviously that's a little bit of an extreme example, because you probably could just borrow some money from someone else or use a credit card instead to buy a new dishwasher. But let's say your only option is a remortgage, so you're just going to do that. So let's say you remortgage from your 75% loan at £225,000 onto an 80% loan, which is £240,000. So obviously what's effectively going to happen here is the bank is going to give you £240,000 that you use to repay the £225,000 loan, and you've got £15,000 spare. And then obviously with that £15,000 that you've just had transferred into your account, you can go and buy your new dishwasher. And for £15,000, you could probably get a really good dishwasher. If you've got any other questions about refinancing, or if you still don't understand it, then leave a comment down below and I'll be sure to try and answer it whenever I can. So how do you go about actually doing a refinance? And it works quite similarly to getting a mortgage. You go online, you look around and browse the different products, you compare it on a price comparison website, and you find the best remortgage for you. You then obviously apply for the remortgage, fill in all your details and like your solicitor's details, and if you've got a current mortgage, the details of that as well. And then obviously the solicitors will sort out the new loan that you want and make sure that the old loan that you had is repaid, and that any spare money, so if you've obviously taken out a bigger remortgage, is paid to you. Obviously we'll still have to go through the necessary credit checks and affordability testing, but it's probably going to be a little bit more relaxed and a bit more lenient compared to a brand new first time buyer's mortgage. And as always guys, if you've enjoyed this video and want to learn more about property investing, then be sure to check out some of my other videos. Alternatively, subscribe to the channel and ding the notification bell, because that way you'll be alerted when I upload a new video. Cheers!